specializes in philosophy of mind, freedom and determinism, and the meaning of life. He's the author of several books on these subjects, and in addition, his most recent books on C.S. Lewis in particular, A Philosophical Walking Tour with C.S. Lewis, Why It Did Not Conclude Rome, and C.S. Lewis is his most recent in 2018. He became seriously interested in C.S. Lewis about 10 years ago when he read 5 of Lewis's works while on fall break and teaching. And he writes, I was struck by how philosophical Lewis' books were. When I delved into the secondary literature on Lewis, I discovered that few treated him as a philosopher. I concluded I would write about Lewis and give him the serious philosophical attention that he deserves, with a focus on his views of reason, happiness, morality, the soul, God, dying to self, and the problem of evil. Along the way, I discovered that many people were concerned with why Lewis never became a Roman Catholic. Given my knowledge of Lewis as a philosopher, I thought I could explain why Lewis never journeyed to Rome, hence the title of my first book of Lewis. Today's presentation will focus on 2 topics, the first being C.S. Lewis on happiness and the meaning of life.
That was last time.
Oh, that was last time.
That was in December.
Okay. Well, this...
Right? So happiness and the meaning of life. You can't hear it, so what do you do with this?
A little closer.
Yeah.
A little closer, okay. Oh my goodness. I don't know how long I can sustain this closeness. Yeah, so I did Lewis on happiness and the meaning of life in December. Today, it's Lewis on reason and faith, which is, I think, actually a much more difficult topic in Lewis, because he never really explained why he came to God. It was a 2-step journey. He was an atheist until his early 30s, then converted to theism, which today just means you have a belief in God. And a couple of years later, he became a Christian. And you read his autobiography, Surprised by Joy, and he doesn't really explain in any intelligible form why he became a Christian, or a theist, first a theist and then later a Christian. So what I'm going to do is, I think you have to read basically the entire Lewis body of literature to get some idea of what was going on with Lewis. And I have this handout with these quotes. And right at the number 1 there, the last couple lines, this comes from his letters. I love reading letters that people write. They're just fascinating, and there are 3 volumes of letters of Lewis's, and the volumes are basically that thick. Prolific letter writer. And in volume 2 of the letters, he wrote this to someone. He says, I was brought back to Christianity by philosophy. So that Lewis told somebody that what actually brought him back to Christianity and to theism first were issues in philosophy. Lewis was a rationalist, and by that I'm just going to mean he thought all of us reason. We can't help but reason. You can't escape reason. He thought life is not about reason. He thought life is actually about pleasure. But he got great pleasure out of reasoning. But to really understand why he came back to Christianity and God, it was through reason. And he thought everybody is on their own journey. way, in particular back to God. He wrote, the first quote here I have for you is to a woman who had become a believer in God, but she had not been able to accept Jesus as divine. And Lewis wrote to her, he wrote the following. This gives you a good sense, I think, of Lewis. If you go on steadily praying and attempting to obey the best light he had given you, can you not rely on him to guide you into any further truth he wishes you to know? Or even if he leaves you all your life in doubt, can't you believe that he sees that to be the best state for you? Conversions happen in all sorts of different ways. Some sharp and some catastrophic, like St. Paul, St. Augustine, or Bunyan. Some very gradual, and notice what he says, intellectual, like my own. No good predicting how God will deal with one. He has his own way with each of us, so don't worry. Continue all your efforts. You are being steered by another. You've only got to row, and therefore the future journey is behind your back. Keep your conscience bright and your brain clear, and believe that you are in good hands. No one can make himself believe anything. That's interesting. No one can make himself believe anything, and the effort does harm. So Lewis was a person who thought we don't have any direct control over our beliefs. Beliefs are mental attitudes that happen to us. You can choose to walk out of here right now. That's something you can choose to do. What you can't do is choose just to believe something. Beliefs happen to you. And so this woman struggling with the divinity of Christ, Lewis's view is, you can't just choose to believe something that you're struggling with. You're just going to have to live with it and see what happens. So no one can make himself believe anything, and the effort does harm, nor make himself feel anything, and the effort also does harm. What is under your control is action and intellectual inquiry. Stick to that. I'll drop down to basically the third one. I think we'll go down there. He thought you can't avoid intellectual inquiry. It's actually pretty easy to do. So he says, to avoid considering the question of God's existence, Lewis recommended the following. Avoid silence. Avoid solitude. Avoid any train of thought that leads off the beaten track. Concentrate on money, sex, status, health, and above all, your own grievances. Keep the radio on. Live in a crowd. Use plenty of sedation. If you must read books, select them very carefully, but you'd be safer to stick to the papers. You'll find the advertisements helpful, especially those with a sexy or a snobbish appeal. Lewis thought that if anybody engaged in serious intellectual pursuits, it was a very dangerous thing to do in terms of religious convictions. He believed reason, the intellect, would in the end take you back to, if you had left God, or would take you to God if you'd never been there. One of the most dangerous things, just reading the next quote here, one of the most dangerous things about the modern world seems to me the fact that most of those who call themselves agnostics have not really got rid of religion, but merely exchanged civilized religion for barbarous religion, worship of sex, of the state, or the elan vital, or the dead, or mystery as such. We're all going to worship something, Lewis believed, and it's pretty easy to find a substitute for God. Now, there are various arguments Lewis is very familiar with them. In the professional philosophical field, there's something called the design argument. Sometimes it's called the teleological argument. Basically, it's an argument for God's existence from order that's found in the external world. Lewis thought maybe some people are taken back to God through considerations of order in the external world, but he thought that really isn't what takes most people to God. So he said, not for me. On the back of, on page 2 here, he says, I still think, this is the second quote, somebody's numbered all this stuff here, so maybe I should, this is number 8. I still think the argument from design, the weakest possible ground for theism. Theism here is just belief that God exists, and what may be called the argument from undesign, the strongest for atheism. The argument from undesign is basically the argument from disorder in the universe. Ultimately, it focuses on the problem of pain, the problem of evil. In the problem of pain, that's one of Lewis's book. Lewis was no less emphatic about his conviction that belief in theism was not inferred from observation of the external world. Here's a quote from Lewis: the spectacle of the universe as revealed by experience can never have been the ground of religion. It must always have been something in spite of which religion, acquired from a different source, was held. So he didn't hold a high view of the argument from design, teleological argument. Number 7 there in your sheet, there's another argument called the cosmological argument. This is an argument from what philosophers call the dependency or the contingency of the universe, the world. And so that you argue not from the order present in the world, just rather from the very fact that the world or the universe exists, you infer, you reason to a cause of the universe. Lewis said about the cosmological argument, it's always been ineffective for him. So, the cosmological argument didn't impress Lewis. There's another one on the front of the page, number 6, the ontological argument, which is basically an argument from we have the idea of God, and what's the best explanation for our having the idea of God. Lewis didn't find the ontological argument at all persuasive. Why then, these traditional arguments, and Lewis, again, you have to understand, was schooled in philosophy. He was a trained philosopher. Why did he come to God, in this case back to God, and to Christianity in the end? It's not easy to figure out, but I have myself become convinced in reading Lewis that he believed belief in God was a function of what one believes about oneself. So he does not go to the external world, doesn't go to design, contingency, the world depends upon something to cause its existence. He doesn't go to an idea about God. Lewis rather turns to the self. What one thinks about God in his mind is going to be a reflection of what one thinks about oneself.
Do you have batteries or something?
Yeah.
Red light. Sorry. I'm still going to use the argument on you.
I'm newer than you are.
That's true. You were here in December and I wasn't.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, why not? So what about the self? Did Lewis think was so pivotal He believed it was pretty much this. Does one believe that one is a soul? Does one believe that one is an entity that's distinct from one's physical body? Lewis thought if you believe you're a soul, you are on your way to theism. So number 9 on the sheet, I had down Lewis believed in God because he believed he's a soul. In a letter from the 3rd volume, somebody writes to him and says, "What is a soul?" Is that back on? No. I don't know.
It just has to warm up.
Oh, it's the warm up. So what is a soul? Lewis's answer, I am. This is the only possible answer, or expanded. A soul is that which can say, I am. So within each man there must be an area of activity, a soul which is outside and independent of her. In relation to nature, rational thought goes on of its own accord, or exists on its own. You might be saying, what in the world does that mean? There is going to be a conference on Lewis, I think, at the end of this entire series, and I believe the book that you're going to read, who's ever going to this, is Miracles. It is without question the most philosophical book Lewis ever wrote. It's a very difficult read. In it, he tries to defend the plausibility of belief in miracles. The way he does it is not to immediately start with things like the resurrection of Jesus, or a virgin birth, or a healing, or something like that. Rather, he starts with your ability to reason. He argues that reasoning itself is a miracle. It's a miracle in the sense that reasoning cannot be explained by natural physical processes. So that when, here comes the philosopher in me, if you're ever to take a logic course, anybody here ever had a logic course? Formal logic is basically sometimes called mathematical logic. The first rule of inference, the first rule of reasoning you get in logic is the following. If P, then Q. P, therefore, what? Q. Now the idea is if you understand, if you apprehend, if the Sixers lost last night, then the season is over. So I tell you, if the Sixers lost last night, then the season is over. The Sixers lost last night. What do you conclude? The season is over. That is what Lewis has in mind by reasoning. If P, then Q. You then learn P. You therefore cannot but conclude, as you all just did, Q. Reasoning is explained, Lewis thought now, by our apprehensions, our understandings of content. The content here being, if the Sixers lose tonight, then the season is over. That's content. The sciences don't deal with content whatsoever. The sciences attempt to explain everything in terms of just non-contentful events. So the sciences are out to discover how things like chemical reactions occur, how physical particles might interact. If you take a science course, you're never allowed, basically now, to introduce a mental explanation of anything. Probably most of us are familiar with this idea when it comes to the intelligent design debate in the public schools. It was a raging debate here within the last, I don't know, 10 years or so. It's kind of died down right now. But there were people who were thinking about, can we introduce the idea of a designer into public school biology courses? Is that permissible to do something like that? Can we introduce the idea of intelligence as an account of what takes place in the biological world? There was a vigorous pushback against this. No, you cannot do this. Why? Well, because you're introducing the idea of God if you do something like that. And we can't bring God into the public school biology courses. That's just not permissible. What most people didn't understand was the objection really wasn't against God as such. God is typically conceived of as an intelligent being, a being that reasons, that makes things for purposes. It's a mind. God is thought of as a mind. And what was not permissible was to introduce into a public school science course the idea of a being that reasons, that thinks, that makes inferences. Just can't do that. And so Lewis understood all this. He said, but maybe you can't explain physical events in the world in these science classes in terms of what's mental in nature. But the fact remains, all of us explain our own reasonings by what's mental in nature. That's just what it is to reason. And so Lewis thought, I am a supernatural being. What I do as a soul is, in and of itself, supernatural in nature. I reason. One other thing I do that Lewis was captivated by is I act for purposes. I typed up all these notes for a purpose. The purpose being something like to clarify what Lewis thought about faith and reason. I act for purposes. That in and of itself is something supernatural. It's above nature. Nature doesn't do anything for purposes because nature is not a mind. It's not intelligent. And so Lewis thought, I'm a soul. And you're just thinking of it because you might think, well, what in the world is a soul? Well, believe it or not, the Christian church, since its inception, was basically a believer in the soul. The church has always been what's called dualist in nature, that believes in the soul-body distinction. Lewis knew this, so that what you are is not your body. You are a soul that has a body. And when you die, this is the way Lewis is thinking of this now, there's the demise of your body, but because you're a soul, you can survive death. And so the supernatural in Lewis's mind is first and foremost located in you. You are a supernatural being. So then he asked himself, well, what accounts for the existence of this supernatural being that I am? And he comes to the conclusion, the only plausible explanation for my existence as a supernatural being is a divine supernatural being, which we call God. So Lewis literally thought, if I exist, God exists. I move from myself, my existence, to the put on the sheets here, I quoted a couple fairly contemporary non-believers in the soul, okay, just to give you a feel for what Lewis was contemplating when he was teaching at Oxford in the 1940s and the 1950s. Number 10 here, here's what Lewis encountered all the time. Not in these two particular individuals, but this is the university life in which he lived and moved and had his being. So here are two statements of the materialistic views of the self espoused by the naturalist Carl Sagan and Francis Crick. Anybody know who Crick is? DNA. That's absolutely right. Co-discoverer of DNA. Let's do Sagan first. Quoting Sagan, I am a collection of water, calcium, and organic molecules, called Carl Sagan. You are a collection of almost identical molecules with a different collective label. But is that all? Is there nothing in here but molecules? Some people find this idea somehow demeaning to human dignity. For myself, I find it elevating that our universe permits the evolution of molecular machines as intricate and subtle as we. But the essence of life is not so much the atoms and simple molecules that make us up, but the essence of life is not so much the atoms and simple molecules that make us up as the way in which they are put together. So Sagan denies there's a soul. There is no such thing as a soul. Lewis, we can pretty well conclude, just from knowing that, Sagan will not believe in God, because Sagan denies the existence of the soul. Here's Crick. The astonishing hypothesis, that's the name of the book from which I took this, the astonishing hypothesis is that you, your joys and your sorrows, your memories and your ambitions, your sense of identity and free will, are in fact no more than the behavior of a vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules. As Lewis Carroll's Alice may have phrased it, you're nothing but a pack of neurons. This hypothesis is so alien to the ideas of most people alive today that it can be truly called astonishing. So Crick, like Sagan, an atheist. Lewis, why are they atheists? Well, because they deny that they themselves are supernatural beings. They're no more than natural beings. That's the explanation for why they reject God. And then the next quote here, number 11, is actually from Miracles. Get a little flavor of how Lewis was thinking about this. In a pond whose surface was completely covered with scum and floating vegetation, there might be a few water lilies. And you might, of course, be interested in them for their beauty, but you also might be interested in them because of from their structure and could deduce that they had stalks underneath which went down the roots in the bottom. The naturalist thinks that the pond, nature, the great event in space and time, is of an infinite depth. There's nothing but water, however far you go down. My claim is that some of the things on the surface, that is, in our experience, show the contrary. These things, rational minds, souls, reveal on inspection that they are at least not floating, but attached by stalks to the bottom. Therefore, the pond has a bottom. It's not pond forever. Go deep enough and you will come to something that is not pond, to mud and earth, and then to rock, and finally the whole bulk of earth in the subterranean fire. So Lewis, here's the way it really does go in his mind, like this. I know I exist right now. I know I am a supernatural being. How do I know that? Well, because I reason and I act for purposes. But I also know this. I don't have to exist right now? I am what philosophers call a contingent being. I exist right now, but I might have not have existed right now. Why then do I exist? And Lewis says, as soon as you're on that trail of reasoning, you have to come to the conclusion that I depend for my existence right now on a necessary being, to which we affix the name God. Now just trying to think about something like this. He talked about going down in the pond. You go down, and you go down, and you go down. You have to hit bottom someplace. Flip it around. Think of it something like this. You're hanging on a rope. You like to climb mountains, let's say. You're hanging on a rope on the side of the mountain. And you see the person next to you, right above you on the rope. And you say, well, I'm glad you're holding on to this. Hold on to me, or else I'm going down. And the person above you says, I'm holding on to the rope too. And then the person above you says, well, I'm glad that person above me's holding on to the rope. Or we're both going down. And the person you hear a little further up says, I'm holding on to the rope too. And so, how many people can hang on to the rope? Lewis, if there isn't somebody not hanging on to the rope, if there isn't that rope attached someplace up top onto solid ground, you're all just going down. You're all going out of existence. You're all going to die. And that's the way he thought about belief that God exists. Every one of us right now exists. We know it. It's inescapable. But we also know if we're seriously turning off the radio, turning off the television, if we're seriously asking ourselves, how is it that I exist right now? Lewis says, you're going to come to the conclusion that you depend upon a being that's necessary, that's not hanging on to the rope, that explains your existence. So that's the first way he comes, I think, to arrive at the belief that God exists. It's clear in miracles, that's the way he's thinking. Second way is he's convinced for all beings who try to make sense out of things. We're sense-making beings. Everybody is a sense-making being, not just theists. Atheists are too. Everybody is trying to make sense of things. And if you go with me to number 13, Lewis had what's become known as his argument from desire. I talked last time about Lewis's view of happiness as the meaning of life. Now, he took this very seriously. He thought all of us exist. We don't have to exist, but we do exist. Something's causing us to exist right now. Something's keeping us in existence right now. But why do we exist? Because we don't have to exist. Lewis believed we are all created for perfect happiness. That is why we exist. We've been created by a being who has made us to be perfectly happy. This idea about being created for perfect happiness enters into his idea we try to make sense out of things. So here we go. Let's read 13. The innate sense of the fitness also was was also the foundation for Lewis's other major reason for believing that God exists, which is now known as his argument from desire. Lewis wrote, quote, "We remain conscious of a desire which no natural happiness will satisfy. I desire perfect happiness. happiness. This is what I want. I want to be perfectly happy. But I also recognize that it's not going to come in this world. I'm not going to be perfectly happy in this world. But is there any reason to suppose that reality offers any satisfaction to it? In other words, is there any reason to think that if it's not fulfilled here, if my desire for perfect happiness isn't fulfilled here, the only reasonable conclusion to come to, he thinks, to make sense out of things is it's possible to have it fulfilled elsewhere. Nor does being hungry prove that we have bread. But I think it may be urged that this misses the point. A man's physical hunger does not prove that man will get any bread. He may die of starvation on a raft in the Atlantic. But surely a man's hunger does prove that he comes of a race which repairs its body by eating and inhabits a world where edible substances exist. In the same way, though I do not believe that my desire for paradise proves that I shall enjoy it, I think it's a pretty good indication that such a thing exists, and that some men will. A man may love a woman and not win her, but it would be very odd if the phenomenon called falling in love occurred in a sexless world. Creatures are not born with desires unless satisfaction for those desires exists. A baby feels hunger. Well, there is such a thing as food. A duckling wants to swim. Well, there is such a thing as water. Men feel sexual desire. Well, there is such a thing as sex. If I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the desire for perfect happiness, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. If none of my earthly pleasures satisfy it, that does not prove that the universe is a fraud. Probably earthly pleasures were never meant to satisfy it, but only to arouse it, to suggest the real thing. So Lewis thought, he's a rationalist, we all are out to make sense of things. I find I have a desire for perfect happiness. It's not fulfillable in this life. How then can I make sense out of this desire? Well, I must be made for another world in which it's possible to have the desire fulfilled. Now, what I thought would be helpful here is to show you, that's the way Lewis is trying to make sense out of things. Let's look at number 14 here. And I used the evolutionary biologist Edward O. Wilson and his colleague Michael Ruse. Now these are atheists. They deny the existence of the soul, but they know we are believers in moral principles. People are moral beings. They think, well, certain things ought not to be done, certain other things should be done. We've got to make sense out of morality. Now, they're atheists, but first and foremost, they're trying to make sense out of morality. They don't believe in souls, but still got to make sense out of morality. Let's look at how they try to make sense out of morality. Out of moral values fit into the account of our lives that people like Wilson propose. His answer is they don't fit because they don't exist. Now again, he's trying to make sense out of morality, moral values. How do they fit in a universe where there is no soul, where there is no God? People are born, they die, and that's it. How do we make sense out of morality? While we believe that such values are real, our belief in their reality is false. So Wilson and Ruse say, we believe in principles. But look at all of our beliefs about this stuff are false. This is the only way we can make sense out of it. According to Wilson and his co-author, Michael Ruse, our belief in morality is merely an adaptation put in place to further reproductive ends. Ethics, as we understand it, is an illusion, fobbed off on us by our genes to get us to cooperate. It is without external grounding. In short, according to Wilson's explanation of human existence, we believe in objective moral values as a result of blind, purposeless causal processes that have no room for such values. Although our belief in the realities of these values is false, the fact that we believe in them makes sense within the evolutionist account of our existence, because the accidental development of the belief proved to be evolutionarily advantageous. It resulted in adaptation, survival, and reproduction. So Lewis knew full well it isn't that theists or Christians are these kind of weird beings walking around that try to make sense out of things. Everybody tries to make sense out of things. So when you have an atheist evolutionist like Wilson and Ruse, they come up against morality, and they're puzzled by morality. How does morality fit into this kind of evolutionary, materialistic world in which there really are no souls and there's no God? They think about it and they say, well, look, there's no question people believe in morality. But might all their moral beliefs actually be false? And we can still explain moral belief. Yeah, that's how it works. The moral belief makes sense in a materialistic evolutionary story because having the belief leads to reproduction and survival. But the beliefs are false. They don't have to be true in order to work. And so they, like Lewis, are trying to make sense of the world in which they live. We're all sense makers. And Lewis thought the best way to make sense out of everything is in the end to acknowledge the existence of God. Because people like Wilson and Ruse, they'll have to admit that we have a desire for perfect happiness. But that desire, in their view, is going to have to be unfulfillable. It can't be fulfilled. And given that it can't be fulfilled, ultimately life is absurd because we have a desire that we can't satisfy. And Lewis thought that's a universe that just doesn't make sense. And if we're sense-making maximizers, if we're trying to make the most sense out of things that we can, we've got to postulate the existence of an afterlife in which we can satisfy the desire for perfect happiness. So to understand Lewis's belief about God and ultimately Christianity, I'm not going to go into that today, but the belief about God, you got to think about yourself. You have to seriously sit down, turn off the radio, turn off the television, stop reading the newspapers, and you have to sit there and kind of reflect about your own life, your own existence. Lewis thought that if you're serious, you will conclude that I am a supernatural being. I am a being whose existence cannot be explained in terms of evolutionary factors, because evolutionary factors can only account for material things. They can only account for material bodies. I am not a material body. I'm a thing that has a material body, but I'm not a material body. Hence, my existence can't be accounted for in terms of evolutionary adaptation. Now, last point, and I'll just throw it open for some questions here. Did Lewis not believe in evolution? He did. What he believed was the evolutionary process cannot explain his existence because he is not his material body. So don't walk out of here thinking, oh, Lewis didn't believe in evolution. No, he did. He just believed it was not an adequate account for his existence because he believed he was a soul that has a physical body. So let's just stop it there because I'm already coming up on quarter after. And let's throw it open for a few questions here.
So you were talking about the going down to the pond and hanging onto the rope.
Yeah.
How is that argument different than first cause?
The argument is different because the first cause argument classically is a temporal argument. In other words, it's pushing things back in time and looking for an initiation of a linear process in time. So we think probably in terms of the Big Bang, something like this. That's an argument that presses backwards in time and looks for a beginning temporally. Lewis is thinking about an account of existence right now. When I'm hanging on the rope right now, I don't have to ask how long have I been hanging on the rope. I'm hanging on the rope now, and something has to be supporting me now. So his concern is not pushing it back. That's kind of the cosmological argument. We're going back in time. He thinks, legitimate question, but for him the interest is in explaining my existence right now without having to worry about how long I've existed. I mean, the way he thinks of it is, I could have existed indefinitely into the past, potentially an infinite past. But no matter how far back I go in terms of my existence, at every point that I exist, I still have to ask, what's keeping me in existence right now? So his is I think, illustratively, we can think of it as a vertical argument, hanging on the rope, as opposed to a temporal argument, going back in time. He's interested in the vertical argument. So no matter how long you hang on that rope, there's got to be something keeping you in existence at every moment in time that you're hanging on the rope. That's the way he thinks of it. Great question.
All right. Everybody doesn't have the same intellectual capability. Therefore, everybody doesn't reason in the same way. What does that mean for the soul?
If I understand you correctly, and help me if I got you wrong here, Lewis, I think, would just say every soul reasons. So that you're driving down the highway, you say to yourself, if that person crosses the yellow line, I'm done for. So you go, if P, then Q. The person starts to cross the yellow line. You conclude, I'm done for. So, if I go down aisle H, I will find product Q in the supermarket. I go down aisle H, there's product Q. Everybody reasons. We couldn't get by in life without reasoning. So, you reasoned to come here today. If I go there, I'll hear some guy blather on. I went there. You heard some guy blather on. So, reasoning is not something reserved for the university educated. Lewis's view is you can't get on in life without being able to reason. You wouldn't be here today unless you reasoned, if I take route such and such, then I will get to the church. I take route such and such, I get to the church. So all of us reason this way. It's not the prerogative of the intellectuals.
I guess I would say, the actions, maybe criminal actions,
if I blow up that building over there, I'll find money downstairs or something. Even the criminal has to reason. The criminal puts their reasoning to devious purposes, but anybody who's engaged in criminal activity has to be reasoning. Otherwise, they couldn't carry out their criminal activity. Yeah.
Is this something that we have innately given to us, or are we required to teach this to our children, the reasoning?
The soul.
I mean, get more deeply involved in what he's saying here and discuss the existence of the soul.
Right, the soul is a being that, in his view, has capacities, it has powers, it has potentials. This is what a soul is. It's an entity that has capacities, let's use that word. So you have the capacity to experience pain, you have the capacity to experience pleasure, you have the capacity to fear, you have the capacity to hope, you also have a capacity to apprehend and understand, and you have a capacity to reason, as the way Lewis looks at it. And so that it might well be the case that, I don't know anywhere where he actually addresses this type of issue, it might be the case we have to be socialized to actually activate our capacity to say reason, but there's no question we have to have that capacity to actually do the reasoning, and everybody has the capacity. It's a separate question, how does the capacity get activated, which I think is more your concern there.
Is it accurate to call Lewis a mind-body dualist?
Yes.
Mind-body dualist.
Yeah. Bill?
Just want everyone to know before you leave, there are these flyers on the tables. You're free to take them with you. If you'd like to sign up today, you can do that and leave it out on the outer hallway here, or you can take them and come back to the office at some point in time, or you can copy them and mail them in. Thank you.
Yeah, the question was, is Lewis a mind-body dualist? Yes, he is. He believes a mind-body dualist is just also called a soul-body dualist, and Lewis is a soul-body dualist. Side comment here. In the Christian church right now, there's a significant challenge being mounted against the existence of the soul. There's a view out there in seminaries being taught that human beings do not have a soul. Human beings are bodies with two kinds of capacities, mental capacities and bodily or physical capacities, and this view denies the existence of the soul. Lewis would have advocated the rejection of that view. He believed in the existence of the mind as an entity that's separate from the physical body. So he was a soul-body dualist, and I'm sure, without question, he would have pointed out the Christian church historically up to this point in time has always advocated it.
So how would Lewis define a person, whether they're inherently good when they're born, or whether, in terms of moral compass, is it something that you're born with, of being inherently good, or how does evil come into such being, like whether you're corrupted by society, or whether you're born with evil intent?
Right, what we went over today is more, what is this thing that can be corrupted, okay? So you got to keep the questions distinct here. We can be corrupted, but what is the thing that gets corrupted? Lewis's view is the thing that gets corrupted is the soul. In one way to take your questions, and something you're asking about the fall or something like this, Lewis's view on the fall is, I think, pretty hard to ascertain exactly what he thinks about it. All I'll say this, he thinks the fall is primarily a problem of pride, so that every one of us has our own fall because we're all succumb to pride. And to get the perfect happiness that he's talking about, basically all of us have to die to self. We have to renounce our pride
if God made us in his likeness, and DNA is what dictates how we are made, what portion of our DNA is God's, and what portion of our DNA codes for the soul?
None of the DNA goes to the soul.
Codes for the soul.
Oh, codes for the soul.
And codes for our portion that is similar to God. And understanding we're getting closer to that with the discovery of the Higgs boson particle bringing light into matter and things. Is there a significance in our technology that will make us be able to figure out which portion of our DNA is actually similar to God's?
Well, I'm not quite sure what you mean. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just not quite sure what you mean. It's similar to God's. God doesn't have DNA. So God, in Lewis's view, is itself, God's a soul. Basically, is the way to think about it. So God doesn't have any DNA. God, in Lewis's view, doesn't have a body. What codes for our soul? I think Lewis's view would be generally that there's an awful lot that's coded for our soul in your language, in the sense that the kinds of desires to which we're subject are coded for in the DNA. Perhaps things like anxiety, whatever, could be coded for in the DNA. So a lot of our life, in terms of our emotions, our feelings, our capacities to feel pain, etc., something's all coded for, because we just all find ourselves having certain kinds of desires and feelings. We didn't choose to have them, so they would be coded. But what you can't code for is the reasoning process itself. In his view, you can be provided information